Normally, this is where I'd say, welcome to the Fantasy Hockey Podcast, but it's not exactly a podcast. Instead, this is going to be a video explaining to you how to use our tool. Now, if you're finding us via YouTube and have never heard of us before, hey, welcome. You can find all the links to our podcast on the tool itself here. You can find our Discord, which if you're going to be using this tool, will be a really valuable resource. I mean, it's a valuable resource regardless, but in there's a channel called Tools, which I'm constantly monitoring, and if you have a bug or if you want a category added or anything like that, I automatically add it and post any kind of updates in there. So it's in real time, pretty much, really quickly updating things. You can see the cat that auto-drafted me right back there. He's sleeping. He thinks he's so innocent. Okay, let's go tab by tab in here. There'll also be a link down in the description to this tool in case you haven't used it before, and so you can follow along or just watch here and then use it after. Let's go tab by tab here. Let's start with the home tab. Now, the first thing here is there'll be an up-to-date as of. It's pretty much just the last time I made changes to the kit in general or the last time that I updated the ADPs, that kind of thing. Now, one really important thing is that to use this kit, what you need to do is you have to make a copy of it. This is just a view only. So what you do is you go to File up here, and there's going to be a link that's called Make a Copy. You've got to click that and make a copy for your specific league. That's really important because you won't be able to use it otherwise. If you go and request access to the sheet, we won't give you access only because this is our working copy, and anyone else touching it would kind of break things. Then there's some quick links to kind of league settings input, skater rankings, goalie rankings, and our 2018 consistency metrics. Okay, and then moving on to directions, this kind of explains what I'm going to go through in this video real quick, just in text format. And there's something called a changelog here. It's just going to explain by day what I did. So what I've added, what I've changed. It's both for me to know what I've done recently in case I break something, and also so that if someone comes in here and let's say you've downloaded a past version of the sheet, you can see if it's actually worth downloading or making a new copy for your league. Okay, so the first thing you've got to do after you make the copy is go to league settings. So you're going to go to league settings, and there's a few things that you have to enter here. So first, you're going to enter what type of league you use. So there's cats categories and points leagues, and that'll kind of determine how the rankings happen because there's different calculations, obviously, for a points league and a categories league. Then you're going to determine what ADP you want to use. There's two options, three, my bad. I haven't added Fantrax yet. So you can choose Yahoo, ESPN, or Fantrax, which Fantrax will be in here right after this. And then for positions, you also have Yahoo, ESPN, and Fantrax. So you can mix and match, or you can use just one. And then for players, I use the whole player list on Fantrax. So there's about 3,000 players and goalies in the list. So if you're doing like a dynasty draft or something like that, you have all the players available. Now, projections-wise, that's up to the kit that you get. And then what you want to do here is that if you're in a categories league, you'll put a 1 next to all the categories that you use. Now, if you don't use a category, just leave it blank. It's okay. And for points, enter the point values for each one. So say that a goal is worth 3 points, you'd enter a 3. For assists, you'd enter not a Q, you'd enter a 2. So that's pretty simple. You just go through and add the point values or just put a 1 for the categories that you count in your league. And then, of course, you'd have kind of what type of league it is, what ADP, and what positions. And then after you do that, what you want to do is you want to go to the Skater Import tab down here. So there's a Skater Import Sheet 1 and a Goalie Import Sheet 1. Now, you can rename these to whatever you want. Say you get Dauber's kit, you can rename Skater Import Sheet 1 to Dauber so that you know that that's Dauber's or Left Wing Lock. It won't really break anything. So feel free to rename these to whatever kit you're using, especially if you're using more than one kit. And it's important to note that we are not giving projections this year. Hopefully next year we can give Fantasy Hockey Podcast projections and put those in as defaults for free. But if not, what you want to do is you want to go buy a kit of your own. There's a lot of options. There's Dauber. Dom is going to be Dom for the Athletic is going to be releasing his in 2 weeks. You can use Scott Colin's free projections in here if you want to use McKean's. Just it works with pretty much anything, and it's pretty simple. Once you buy those kits, you almost always get a spreadsheet of projections. So what you want to do is the first thing you want to go to this import sheet after you've done the league settings, and then all you're going to do is that on the categories that you count. So say you count goals and assists, right? You copy and paste the names from that sheet. And then you copy and paste the goals, and then you copy and paste the assists and kind of the order that they have them in. The order does not matter here. And you do the same for every kind of category that you have. And you can see that all the categories are in here at the top. If you don't count a category, it's okay. You can just leave it blank. It won't be counted. It won't hurt a player or anything like that if it's blank. But if you delete one of these columns, it will break pretty much the entire sheet. So that's kind of important. And the same thing goes for goalies. So you can see here how you have kind of You can put the name in, you can put the different categories that you count or the projections that you have. And this already has last year's data. So once you put in all the stats, 2018 stats, rankings, whatever will be automatically entered. So you don't have to do that. That's already in here. Now, if you're using more than one import sheet, say you're using Dauber and Dom and Scott Cole, and you want to compare all three, right? Because when you go to the player rankings tab here, it shows you the rankings for import sheet 1, import sheet 2, and import sheet 3, so that you can compare where Dauber ranks somebody, where Dom ranks somebody, where Scott ranks somebody, or wherever you're getting your projections from. If you're using Yahoo's, if you're using RotoWire, if you're using ESPN, doesn't really matter. It'll do the calculations all the same. So once you do that, if you have more than one, you go to View up here, and there's Hidden Sheets, and you can find more import sheets here. So you just open up one of these import sheets and import your stats. By default, they're hidden just because I assume most people will have just one kit. But of course, if you're more hardcore, playing in pro leagues or whatever, you're going to want more than one import sheet most likely. And then also another thing that's cool in this rankings tab is you have a consistency score that we built out. I'll go over to a finished one. Let's go over to, we just did a mock draft, a points only mock draft. So you can see here that I put the points in here. I put ESPN because we draft on ESPN, put the point values, 3 points for a goal, 2 points for an assist, and 4 points for a win. And then I put all the stats here for projections on goalies and skaters, and everything was automatically calculated. So if you go over to the player rankings tab, here's where you see the projections. I recommend ranking by ADP so that you can follow along with your draft, and you can watch the mock drafts for an explanation of how to draft more intelligently using kind of ADP rankings as opposed to the actual rankings, because the whole thing is you want to get somebody that's really good value, say like a top 10 ranked guy at the 30th pick, right? That's how you win a draft, is by getting max value at each pick, not necessarily reaching to get the best value. It's at that specific spot that you're getting the most value. So that's what's important. Now this, just to note, also very important, comes with a draft board. So it comes automatically with 16 teams. Now, if you don't use 16 teams, you just delete in the middle of any of these columns. So if we go back to the other one that's unfilled, for example, it'll just say insert team name. Now, say you only do, 12 teams in your league. Just delete in the middle wherever you want. You can delete down to 12. And then you insert the team names in the order that they're drafting. And then what happens is that as you fill these players in, and the nice thing is that when you go to put in a player name, it automatically recognizes the players that are selectable. So you can't mistype Connor Hellebuck, you can't mistype Kyle Connor, that kind of thing. It'll throw up an error if that happens, so it's pretty kind of fail-proof there. And then after you do that, what's kind of cool is that it automatically enters the team here. So in the drafted team, it'll put in kind of who took that player, and then it'll cross out that player as not draftable. Now, that allows you to do quite a few things. So the first is to know, of course, if you want to leave all the drafted players up, you can know that that player's not selectable. Cool. The other thing you can do, which is pretty sweet, is that say a player has been drafted, you can actually go in here in the filters and select that they haven't been picked. Granted, here it has not been added, but pretty much what you do is that if you scroll down here, you'll see that it's ref is the only one that is available. So what you do is you'd go down to a filter here, and you'd pretty much scroll down and say, okay, clear them all, and I only want, let's say, blanks, or this would be ref in this situation of drafted teams, right? So you can pretty much filter out anybody that's already been drafted, and so you'll be left with a list of only who's available, and you can see what their ADP is, what their stats are or their ranks are based on kind of the kit that you imported. And then the 2018 stats, of course, are also alongside it. So you can kind of see, for example, in this league, Johnny Gaudreau this year's projected for 14. Last year finished 9th. And then here you also see that we give you the consistency score and a score that we gave them. So this is worth an A, whereas Patrick Kane was an A+ last year in consistency. We'll do a whole separate thing on consistency. So if that doesn't make sense, it's okay. Then over here to the right, you can see team compositions. So it's just where are the positions for each team? How did they fill up positionally? And then the last thing here is that if you're in a points league, this is where you want to go for the overall points. So player rankings and goalie rankings are just ranks. So where do they rank relative to everybody else, right? So it's just ranking and saying, okay, well, I want the 50th best skater at the 70th ADP. Cool, that's pretty damn good value. But sometimes you also want to look at points and say, for example, well, what's the difference between these two ranks? Or what's the difference between these two players? What's that difference in points, right, for positions? Like, say you're between a left wing and a defenseman. well, how much extra value does that left wing get you versus the defenseman? And that's pretty important to know. And so for points leagues, that really matters. In a Cats league, that matters, but it's a little bit harder. I may add a sheet for that later, but more than anything in Cats league, the rank is kind of the most important thing, and then use your judgment. Knowing the player, like for example, Tom Wilson, you know that he's going to get you more peripherals than points. But in a points league, just straight points matters quite a bit. So that's where this is, and it also gives you, of course, your 2018 points. So that's the important. Those are the kind of the three most important bits: is the player rankings, the goalie rankings, and the all player rankings. If you're in a points league, otherwise, if you're in a Cats league, I'd just stick to these two. And then at the end, there's kind of our consistency metrics that you can kind of peruse through if you're curious on what's here. We'll be releasing a separate consistency tool where you can actually do a search and kind of compare players and see where they were most consistent, least consistent, how do they compare to their peers, that kind of thing. But if anything, I think this is more so to help you draft. So as you're going through the draft, you can kind of fill out players. And then when you get to a spot, for example, here I'm at Artemi Panarin and Taylor Hall. That's fantastic value for both of those guys. And Taylor Hall, I reached a little bit. He had an ADP, I think, of about 40-ish, something like that. So probably around right here, pick one of round 4 in a 10 team. But when you look at it, I was like, okay, he's not going to get to me at first overall, so that's where I want to take him. So it's a pretty useful tool. I hope this video kind of helped. I kind of went fast to make sure that it wasn't too long. It's still 10 minutes, but I tried to not make it too long. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, remember to come and join our Discord where you can ask questions. I'm in there all the time. There's other people in there that will answer any questions, and I'm constantly fixing bugs and adding any categories that you might want. Other than that, be sure to tune into the podcast, which we're releasing quite often nowadays, and it's focusing completely on draft strategy. And also be sure to follow us on Twitch or subscribe to us here on YouTube, where we're doing mock draft every single weekend and even sometimes randomly throughout the week. So be sure to join those, and see you next time.